Hey, good morning. Yes, it is. It is Thursday, February 27th of 2025. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I thought I'd bring up because I got a lot of questions about, being able to start a new business in 2025. Is it viable? Hang tight. Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. My name is Eric, if you didn't already know it. And yes, this is the weekday, Monday through Friday. Today is Thursday, February 27th of 2025. So, what do I mean by is it a viable time to start and this is what the channel is about, is small engine repair, but I know that we're covering other spectrums like automotive and so forth. Of any trades of where it's a service oriented. You're providing a service and they give you money for doing the work, right? And I hear a lot from people saying, can you start a successful business or start a business this year and have it become successful? And the answer is yes, absolutely. But there's a lot that goes into how to make that business successful. You know, just by buying a business, setting up shop, saying you're a mechanic, if you don't have a lot of skills, no customer base, these are all strikes against you. And in most of my videos, the ones that I see that tend to do well have been doing it nights and weekends and have just kind of continued on by taking it from the part-time to the full-time. And that's a big leap. And they're two different animals, right? Because part-time, that's gravy money, right? And you can pick and choose who you want. When you make it a business and you're relying on a paycheck, your set of values tend to drop on who you're willing to take on for customers. Customers that you would normally kick to the curb, you're taking on until you get enough work coming in that you don't need them, right? But is small engine with all the battery stuff coming around, is it viable for the next few years? Absolutely. Absolutely. But you, as a business person, do your research. Get a business plan, sit down, and do it. Even if you're not going to borrow one penny from anybody, this is all going to be on your own. Sit down and do that business plan, because that business plan will hone you in and narrow your scope. And that's what I want you to do. That's what the business plan is for. Is in the beginning, you're kind of like scatterbrained, right? And what I used to do, and I still do on bigger projects, is I'd have a board and I would start writing things down as I was thinking of them. And they're all garbled all over the place, right? Until I started moving them into the right columns and tossing ones that didn't need to be there. Because let's be honest, we all think we can succeed, right? Until we fail. And then some people think they can succeed and then they talk themselves out of it and fail before they start. You have to start somewhere. And that is deciding, am I doing it part-time or full-time? If I'm doing it full-time, where am I going to get my customer base? Where am I going to get my new customers? Do I have enough exposure of, let's say, cars driving by that people would see that you are doing that type of business? And to be honest with you, I'll tell you, if you have a bunch of lawnmowers sitting in your driveway, most people think you're repairing small engine and will stop and ask you. So if you have a business, even if you don't have a sign on the front, they're probably going to stop and see if you can fix their units. And what I used to do was when we were first starting up in the mechanical part, I didn't charge a lot of money per hour because we had a low overhead. I owned the building, and I owned the land that was on it free and clear. The lawnmowers that I bought from the other repair shops in the area were ones that they had kind of given up on, but they were in that in between stage. See, the guys that were already doing it in my area were floor planning, trying to sell new units, right? And what they'd end up with is a bunch of used units that needed a little tinkering to get them going again. So I would go talk to them and I would buy out their trade-ins, bring them back. Claude and I go through them, and that's how we first started building our customer base, was selling on Craigslist the units that we repaired, that we bought and paid cash for. And the money that we sold for, we'd mark them up $100, $200 on a rider, and that would go into a slush fund. And then it got to the point of where I was using money from the profits of fixing those lawnmowers to buy more. Because most of them that were floor planning didn't want to screw around with the used. And that's how times have changed, right? Because it used to be kind of like a car dealership, that if you were floor planning, you took the used one in. You didn't make a lot of money on the sale of the new one, but you cashed in on the sale of the used one to the groups that couldn't afford to have a brand new one. Times changed where a lot of the shops didn't want to deal with them, but the only way they could do anything with the customer, and it's all a numbers game, right? And let's say that the lawnmower they're looking at is $5,500, all right? And they've got one that they want to trade in. And the dealer really doesn't want it. Does not want nothing to do with it. But in order to get the customer to sign on the dotted line, he says, I'll take your old one in trade towards the new one. So let's say they give you $500 for your lawnmower. Now, what they aren't telling you is that there's a $500 rebate on that $5,500 lawnmower that you're purchasing already. So instead of giving you the rebate, they're putting it down as a down payment with a trade-in. You follow me? Because had you paid cash, you would have got it for the $5,000 instead of the $5,500, because they would have given you the rebate. But they're just playing the numbers game. Now they have your lawnmower, and they don't have anything in it because they used the rebate to bring the price down. But they really don't want to deal with it, because most people that trade their lawnmower in is because it's having more issues than they care to admit. And it's costing more per year to keep that thing running than it is just to go out and buy a new one with a warranty. So what I see taking place now, plus you have Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, but even a lot of your dealers are not taking your old machine in on trade. They do not want it. And what ends up happening is either the owner pushes it out to the curb to go for scrap, or they throw it on Facebook Marketplace and hope somebody jumps on it. And a lot of times they're at the point where they're willing to give it away, but if you put it for free on the curb, nobody will take it. But if you put $50, somebody give you $50 for that lawnmower. So that's how we capitalized in the beginning. Was we were buying up the inventory of used stuff that these dealers were sitting on. And for the most part, many of them were minor repairs. They were good running mowers. Everything was functional. Valves out of adjustment, needing a tube and a tire, little stuff. Little stuff that we could do and make a couple $100 on. And I'll be honest with you, some we made thousands of dollars on. It all depends on how big of a piece of equipment. The more expensive the equipment, the more money you make. Hopefully. So is it still viable to get in? Yes. Have a business plan, sit down and go through it. Wait a couple weeks, reread that business plan and go through it again and keep honing it down as tight and giving as many answers to yourself as possible. So the next question is it easier in the rural area or in the city area for a small engine repair shop to flourish, to do good? It all depends. I mean, each one of them has their pros and cons, all right? The closer you are to the city, the closer you are to more populated areas. That means more possible customers, right? And I've pretty much seen where the closer you get to the city, it's more push mowers than it is riders. But you can still knock out, if you're just doing a service on them, most push mowers you can knock out in about half an hour and make $30-40 on. Whereas a rider, going to take you a little longer than that by the time you do from front to back, service it, and do what you need to do. Closer you are to the city, the more customers you have, but the more regulations you have, the higher cost it is to have a building, a business permit down there, and you're jumping through all these hoops just to be able to set up shop. That's why a lot of them closer to the cities are doing it nights and weekends under the table in their garage because they don't have to deal with a bunch of permits. And a shop, closer you get to the city, the more pressure you have on how are you disposing your oil, your gas, everything else. Or how are you housing it with containers? There's a lot more rules and regulations closer you get to the city. Is it right? No, because it should be that way for everybody. But you have more eyes, more scrutiny over what you're doing as you get towards a bigger population. Now, in the rural area, is it still viable? Yeah. But now your customers are spread out. Now you're having to offer a pickup and drop-off service for a fee. You can't do it for free. You are taking on any and all customers because there's a lot fewer customers in that area. Instead of talking about maybe 3 or 4 blocks that you're handling in the city, you may be handling 30 miles in radius of your shop to try to get to work. The farther away you get from the city, the tendency is more towards a rider, a push, a weed eater, and a chainsaw that most homeowners have. The closer you get to the city, a push mower, and they usually have either an electric or a battery operated weed trimmer. So that trimmer replacing the string or the button on it, and the push mower is a blade, oil change, possible valve adjustment on some of the ones that are coming through with overhead valves. Each comes with its own challenges, but also with its own benefits. The ideal is if you're a known somebody in the rural part. If you're doing it nights and weekends, you already have a customer base, right? So it's slightly, you've been doing it right along, so it's just trying to expand on it. And as you expand, you're taking on anybody until you got enough work coming in. But, if you follow back a few videos back, I talked to you about a friend of mine that raced sleds. And he was well known in not just northern New York. He was well known up in Canada, Buffalo, downstate, of how he could take any engine and get the max horsepower out of it. He was a high performance guy. He knew, and he had his own dyno testing and everything else. When you have a skill like that you have a name for yourself. And he built the name for himself when he was working for somebody else, but racing his own sleds. And he developed that reputation. And he had a niche market of all these people that wanted him to do the same thing to their machine. Get it to the top end horsepower. Faster, faster, faster. But what he ended up doing was he ended up screwing himself because he was working on his machine and the team members that he had on the team, their machines, and not getting to the ones that were dropping off units for just general repair and the ones that were being dropped off for high performance. Because they would send him just the engine to rebuild and send it back. Some would send the whole machine so that they could dyno test it with his laptop. But he screwed up because he got sidetracked on thinking that the racing part of it was more important than paying bills. And he could have made a boatload of money just on those high performance engines. He didn't need to do anything with the general public. People were sending him engines from all over. So there are differences between being closer to the city and out in the rural area. You have less regulations, on having lawnmowers around your property in the rural part of the states than you do, in the cities. If you have 8 or 10 junk lawnmowers and it's next to people's houses that, are $750 to and up, hundreds of thousands, $750,000 and up, they're going to raise a commotion because you're bringing down the value of their house because you got these junk lawnmowers sitting in the yard. And those junk lawnmowers belong to customers, by the way. So you have a whole different thing that you're dealing with. And if you're from the city, you're more apt to do well. Whereas if you're from the country and you move to the city because it's a more populated area and more work, you're going to be rudely awakened. And the same thing, somebody from the city moving out into the country thinking that they're going to run things the way they did down there, it just doesn't fly. There's a whole different way of going about things. So the next thing is, where is the best place to buy parts? Replacement parts, carburetor kits, what have you. I would highly recommend any of the OEMs. And when I say OEMs, I'm not sure what area you are from, but for us, we have Gardner Canal, we have Power Distributors, which is Briggs. We have, don't be scared off by dealing with the aftermarket companies like Stenz and Rotary. They have quality controls in place in China where they're getting their parts. And if you look at the parts of the OEM, it says made in China as well. But they each have somebody there from the States watching the quality control to make sure that the product that's coming out is exactly the way they want it. Not just thrown into a bin saying that they will fit everything like you may turn out with buying it through someone directly from China. But you have a lot of other companies out there that I recommend. Trimmer Trap just got bought out by another company, but I've dealt with them for years and years, and they take And they make great quality products for trailers, enclosed, and just landscaper trailers to hold equipment, blowers. You can lock them into place, everything else. You're going to get the best deal because we're talking honesty, right? You're going to get the best deal by buying it on Amazon, eBay, or Temu. And the first two you recognize, but the last one you probably don't. Temu or Tume, one or the other. I don't have it in front of me. But they're a clearinghouse for stuff that has surplus that the Chinese are trying to get rid of. So they run the surplus through this to get rid of it, so that they can keep producing more, right? eBay is probably cheaper than Amazon. But the thing that I'm finding right now with both eBay and Amazon, even if they say they're a U.S. seller, doesn't mean that you're going to get it in a couple days. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get the right parts. And even looking at the pictures won't get you the right parts. I mean, I've spent close to $600 on a hydraulic pump for a farm tractor that the picture, the part number, everything matched, and when it showed up, it was nothing like any of it. So you have to spend all that time sending it back, trying to find the right one. And when you're doing that, you're not getting paid because that tractor's still sitting in a bay waiting for a hydraulic pump. But the other option would be going to John Deere and paying 3 to 4 times that amount for an OEM one that you could have within a day or two. I leave it up to my customer. Most often the case, my customer wants us to buy it off from eBay or Amazon and get it taken care of. All right, so I'm going to start wrapping this up. I think we're going to do a part 2, and that is floor planning. And the tools doesn't make the mechanic, it's the mechanic makes the tools. Which says if you're a Snap-on buyer of all these tools, does not make you a professional mechanic. You guys have a great Thursday, and we'll see you here bright and early tomorrow morning. Thanks so much for watching.